Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Aubrey, your humble hostess from Evernet Gaming, and welcome to not really a news video, but it's also not really a gaming video, obviously. It's more of, I guess you could call it a fireplace discussion. I'll tell you what, watch to the end of the video and then leave a comment giving me an idea of a name for this kind of discussion video. Because obviously it's not enough gaming content to be considered a gaming video, and it's also not enough news to be really considered news. It's more just me giving my opinions on something that's recently been a wee bit of a problem in the world of Warcraft. So obviously, let me start by saying, yes, I have been gone for 2 weeks. Unfortunately, I've been having a bit of a dry spell. Haven't really had any good content to cover, which kind of sucks. Sometimes it happens though, especially when you don't really have any good internet and you can't cover any games, which I'd love to be doing right now, but got news that the internet project has been delayed until early spring of 2019. A little frustrated, but my hands are kind of tied. There's nothing I can do about that. We saw a Q&A last Thursday where Hazzikostas said some stuff that's not really what people want to hear. If you've been paying attention to the recent position shift of Blizzard, you'll know that Hazzikostas is taking over as CEO. So unfortunately, that leaves World of Warcraft without a game director. Not for long, however, as J. Allen Brack is going to become our new game director. Now, let me start by saying that I have nothing personal against Hazzikostas. I don't like the way he answers some things, but I think he has a specific skill, and he's better at macro managing than he is at micromanaging. And what I mean by that is he's probably going to be very good at doing what Mike Morhaime did, which is making sure all the little cogs of each franchise and each little intellectual property work, and making sure that each little IP and each development team of said IP are, high morale, doing what they're supposed to do, and pushing out content that the community loves. He's less so good at dealing with what the community of World of Warcraft needs because of how the Q&A is structured. Likewise, I think J. Allen Brack will be a lot better at micromanaging World of Warcraft's needs. Dealing with the community on a more personal basis, on a more being able to talk more in depth in a Q&A about things that the community is really interested in. When are they going to fix shamans? When are they going to fix shadow priests? When is, Azerite not going to suck, for example? Which takes us into the next part, and probably the part I'm going to ramble on about for a good 5 to 10 minutes. Don't quote me on that time, it's probably going to be longer. The Azerite System! Now, granted, I have been fiddling around with the Azerite System a little bit this week, and I've kind of softened my stance on it. Not greatly, but it's better than it was. So originally, what I thought of the Azerite System was I thought that it was just sort of a... Just move my microphone real quick. A half-assed attempt to replace the Legion artifacts. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, to understand how the Azerite system differs, we first have to look at how they're the same. You see, both systems impact the way you play your spec to varying degrees. Both artifacts and Azerite gear are an added system that seeks to enhance the gameplay that's already there, and both systems have garnered strong opinions, both positive and negative. However, the reason Azerite's worse comes down to what it's replaced, and that goes beyond artifact weapons. You see, artifact weapons served as an additional system that we could invest our time into, and from that time investment, we received meaningful traits and even a unique ability that came to be, in some cases, integral to our ability rotation. With Azerite gear, yeah, we get traits that are decent, they aren't great, and while they do provide some meaningful choices, for example, do I want a buff that increases exponentially every week I kill 3 bosses in Aldir? Or do I want my regrowth to also apply their individual heal over time ticks to the target of my life bloom? Unfortunately, the choices often come out being too clear-cut, and one trait's the obvious winner over the other, leading to a lack of real options. Now, I'm not saying that artifact weapons were the paragons of choice. At the end of the expansion, it mainly came down to us just investing all of our AP into a single trait to give us a stacking 1% buff to healing, damage, or stamina. But the difference there was the journey to that trait was inundated with meaningful gameplay affecting traits. Fire mages, for example, getting the stacking crit buff every time they didn't land a critical strike so that they wouldn't run into the issue of never having a reliable hot streak window. Or Feral Druid's Shadow Rip, where whenever you would use abilities against a target affected by Rip, it had a chance to create a duplicate, essentially giving you 2 heavy-hitting damage over time effects for the cost of 1. Azerite armor, however, feels like a non-stop grind against ever-increasing Azerite levels on gear, requiring you to constantly keep playing day after day, grinding endlessly to try and keep your neck piece, the Heart of Azeroth, up to snuff. The artifact power grind sucked, sure, But at the same time, you could always go back to your order hall and put your hard-earned AP into your weapon, instead of going through the thing, amazingly, both my Warlock and my Druid have gone through, which is, let's say you have a helm and a chest piece at 340, but you're stuck with a 325 pair of shoulders, and no matter what you do, you just can't seem to get a better pair of shoulders to drop. Now, while we're on the topic of traits, the traits for Azerite armor are no contest when you compare them to the Legion ones. Again, do I want my regrowth on other people to heal my life bloom target, or do I want to get some mastery every so often? The choice is, unfortunately, pretty obvious. Now, I'm no game designer, but even someone like me can come up with some really good ideas to make the Azerite system even better. I mean, I even went and asked some friends, and one idea was to scrap the Azerite armor and make the neck piece sort of like a new artifact weapon, have all the traits bound to the neck piece. Now, my personal idea was to have the system give you a piece of Azerite armor, like it does right now, but instead of, say, giving you, out of 5 traits, only 2 options, one for your spec and one generic trait, have 4 of those traits all be based around your current specialization, with the final one being the generic option, and then for the inner rings, have it be based around your spec's role. So let's say, for instance, you're a healer. Depending on how many rings that piece of gear may have, let's say the outer rings are all based around traits that actually affect your abilities for your spec, but then the middle rings have traits based around healing. So some might be tied to certain spec abilities, like say Wild Growth giving you some mastery for your Resto Druid, and some generic traits like Concentrated Mending, or your healing spells having a chance to apply a heal over time that gets stronger every time it ticks. This would deal with one of the issues a lot of players have, where it comes down to 2 traits, and that's not by choice, that's by design. The Azerite armor only has 1 spec-specific trait for each spec. For a Druid, you have, on one piece of gear, 1 trait for Feral, 1 for Resto, 1 for Guardian, and 1 for Balance. And it feels like it would be a much more enjoyable system if instead it had spec-specific traits, and when you swapped specs, it would spin the little rings on your Azerite gear and give you traits for, say, Feral, and melee DPS, and maybe on that same piece of gear, Mobility. So in last Thursday's Q&A, Ian said that they are removing the generic trait from the outer ring. This is a step in the right direction, but it's not a step far enough. You see, people don't really hate the generic traits. Some of them are actually quite alright. What we don't like, however, is the power discrepancy between the generic and this spec-specific traits. If you want a player to make a choice, it should at least be a meaningful one. Ian also said some things that really pissed me off about reforging, which starts at 5 gold to reforge your Azerite gear, but only 1 piece at a time, so if you reforge 3, it goes from 5 to 10 to 20, because it doubles every time you use it. Reforging, of course, lets you pick different traits from your Azerite gear, but that in of itself is a weird design, especially when he said, if you don't like having to spend 5, 10, 15,000 gold, just don't reforge for a week. This prompted me to question whether he has actually any idea what the player base does in World of Warcraft. Now granted, some people say if you work in a fast food restaurant, would you really want to eat the food there? I mean, you get sick of the smell by the end of the workday. And sure, while that's a valid point for both fast food and World of Warcraft, Ian really doesn't seem to get that that's not how the player base does things. A lot of people do a wide array of content, from PvP to Mythic Plus to raids and everything in between. And a lot of people spend, unfortunately, an exorbitant amount of gold on a system that shouldn't have a gold cost. I'm essentially being told if I dislike wasting my hard-earned gold on a pointless system, I should either A, stop playing the game for a week, since reforging costs decay by half every week you don't use them. I should B, play only one type of content, or C, make a video explaining how stupid the reasoning behind this statement is. This is why I think Ian Hazzikostas would make a better CEO than a game director. He's far better at the sort of laid-back kind of water cooler discussions than Q&As where you have a community that's passionate about your game and will justify their anger based on the rhetorical statements you say to them. One last reason Azerite's unpopular and despised by the majority. It replaces something we already had with something worse. No, not artifact weapons, tier sets. Now, in a previous video, I did say that I understand why they would replace tier sets with Azerite gear when people were going as far back as farming Mythic Tomb of Sargeras during progression raiding in Antorus. Now, that was because the set bonus was better. Unfortunately, using the excuse that the set bonuses weren't great is kind of redundant when you consider the people who say that designed the bonuses in the first place. 2 things before we wrap this up. One friend did say it's possible Azerite is in its infancy because if Blizzard had have thrown us this super epic, totally off the chart system of really strong traits, then it would constantly have to keep one-upping that system until it all came crumbling down. That's a possibility, but it seems somewhat unlikely considering how Blizzard's been reacting in regards to Azerite, taking 35, give or take, minutes of a 55-minute Q&A, kind of beating around the bush when it comes to Azerite, making it look like Blizzard got caught with their pants down, hoping this will be a super popular and successful system, only to have it backfire. Secondly, Ian did say in a previous Q&A that the way the expansion's unfolding is almost like a puzzle. By the end it will all come together and make more sense. Unfortunately, it doesn't do anything for the right here and now, which is where you want to focus if you want to keep your players both interested and entertained. Focus on the immediate future, not having it all make sense at the end. This isn't a movie like Cloud Atlas, after all. Well, that's it for me. If you made it here, you're an absolute legend, and I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your hopefully relaxing weekend to spend some time with me. Again, let me know in the comments below what your name idea is for this sort of discussion video. It's not really a blog or a gaming video or, even a news video. It's more just me kind of sitting down and looking at something in the gaming industry that doesn't work and offering some ideas on how to make it better. I've been your humble hostess, Aubrey from Evernath Gaming. I'll see you next weekend.